That's the first line I found, buried in an anonymous 18th century journal, written in a scrawl so shaky it looked like it had been carved by trembling hands. It was about two sisters, twins, known only as the Candle Sisters. No birth records, no last name, no graves, just whispers. Some said they were oracles, others called them witches. But history, it pretended they never existed. And that's your first clue. When history goes silent, someone made it that way. You see, in 1732, there was a fire in a monastery near Lüneburg, Germany. The locals blamed lightning. The monks claimed divine punishment. But hidden in the soot was a scorched sigil, an ancient alchemical mark for twin sacrifice. The kind that doesn't ask permission. The kind that binds blood to fire. The Candle Sisters lived there. Servants of silence, cloaked in white linen. Candle wax always dripping from their hands like stigmata. And every night, they lit 2 candles in the chapel. Same time, same ritual, same words whispered under breath. Until one night, they didn't stop at the candles. They lit themselves, together, in front of 13 witnesses who never spoke again. But here's the part they don't tell you. Those candles, they weren't wax, not fully. They were mixed with blood and ash, ritual wax, used in ancient Mesopotamian rites to call watchers, entities that don't come for prayers. They come for obedience. See, the Candle Sisters weren't crazy. They were chosen. Or bred, raised in secrecy by a rogue sect of the Dominican order. A group that believed martyrdom unlocked spiritual gateways. They were taught that pain was language. Fire was transformation. And the body, just fuel for the message. This isn't myth, it's design. Because even now, in certain circles of power, twins are seen not as coincidence, but as tools. Duality, light and shadow, life and death, a mirror and a doorway. And when those twins burn themselves alive in perfect silence, it's not suicide. It's a signal. So ask yourself, why did the church erase their names? Why were their ashes collected in 7 separate urns and hidden in different cathedrals? You were never supposed to know they existed. But now you do. And if that flame stirs something in you, you've already started to burn. They called it cleansing, a holy purge, a necessary silence. But that's not what it was. It was containment, a desperate, calculated response by men in robes who feared what they couldn't control. Because what the Candle Sisters awakened didn't die with the fire. It spread. You see, after the flames, 13 monks were relocated, not defrocked, not punished, transferred, scattered across Europe like pieces of a cursed puzzle. 1 to Toledo, 1 to Lyon, 1. This is crucial. To Vatican Archives Division XT. You've probably never heard of that department. You're not supposed to. It's the section reserved for ritual anomalies, incidents labeled spiritual warfare, in documents stamped sub rosa, Latin for under the rose, the ancient symbol of secrecy. But there's something worse than secrecy. It's when truth gets ritualized. Because once something is turned into ceremony, it stops being questioned. It becomes a machine, a repeating mechanism fueled by blind obedience. That's what they did with the Candle Sisters. They didn't erase them. They incorporated them, embedded the story into symbols, art, even architecture, but only for those who knew how to read the code. 7 European cathedrals house those urns, each built on pre-Christian sacrificial grounds, each aligned with specific lunar cycles, each equipped with confessionals that weren't for confession, but for containment. Whispered prayers are one thing, but when 13 chosen clergy chant synchronized phrases learned from forbidden Babylonian texts, phrases the Candle Sisters were forced to memorize from age 6, what you get isn't worship. It's invocation. They called it the living flame, not metaphor, literal energy, conscious, hungry, designed to tether itself to flesh through bloodline contracts. And the Candle Sisters, they weren't just victims, they were keys, engineered from birth through generational breeding programs, hidden under the guise of orphan sanctuaries. Records show their mother was institutionalized. Diagnosis, religious hysteria. Symptoms, she claimed her twins spoke languages they had never heard at 6 months old. This isn't religion. It's psychological warfare waged through ritual. Pain became initiation, silence became obedience, and fire became the final truth. Tell me, why are so many elite bloodlines obsessed with twins? Why do secret societies keep mirrors in their initiation chambers? And why does every record of those 13 monks end in sudden death, suicide, or mysterious disappearance within 7 years? Because the signal didn't stop. It just got quieter. Until now. You're hearing it again. And it's speaking through you. That low hum behind the words. That pressure in your chest. It's not just curiosity. It's recognition. Something buried deep is waking up. And that's exactly what they feared. Because the Candle Sisters weren't the beginning. They were a continuation. part of a much older mechanism passed down through blood and belief. Long before cathedrals, before Christianity, before even Sumer, there were twin priestesses in the deserts of Akkad. They were bound by a rite called Ene Mekuthat Liptu, the secret of the flame beneath. It was a ritual not meant for gods. It was meant for gates. And the twins? They weren't worshippers. They were guards. Anchors between this world and something else. A force older than names, that doesn't ask to be served, only remembered. That's the core of all true power, memory embedded in ritual. But memory can be dangerous when it returns to the wrong hands. That's why institutions like the Vatican, the Crown, and certain, non-existent, branches of intelligence agencies go to extreme lengths to control narrative. They don't destroy truths anymore. They bury them under distractions, under ridicule, under modern explanations. But not everything can be explained away. In 1996, a German researcher named Klaus Lennart found fragments of the Lüneburg Monastery's original choir book. Scorched, brittle, but legible. Inside were verses that didn't match any Christian hymn. They were written in Proto-Akkadian. Ritual commands, one line translated to, "She who burns by choice opens the gate for he who listens in silence." Within weeks, Lennart was found dead. Official cause, carbon monoxide poisoning. But his journal, recovered later by his assistant, showed something chilling. In his final week, he claimed he was hearing whispers through electrical devices, old radios turning on by themselves, static forming words. Always the same voice, always female. Always repeating, "Remember me, remember us, da." You think this is a story. It's not. It's a weapon hidden in narrative form. Truth so deep, they disguise it as fiction just to keep it alive. Because every time someone remembers, the signal strengthens. And every time someone wakes up, the flame grows. So if you're still here, you're not watching anymore. You're participating. You're remembering. And once remembered, it can never be unknown. But awareness? That's the key they fear most. Because once a man begins to see, he stops obeying. And that's what this was always about. Not just sacrifice, not just blood, but control. Psychological, spiritual, generational. They didn't just burn the Candle Sisters. They studied them, copied them, weaponized them. You ever wonder why cults always have twin flames? Why intelligence agencies obsess over twins in MK Ultra files? Why ancient cultures across continents, who never interacted, all spoke of divine dualities? Not because it's myth. Because it's a system. A mirror system. One side of you conforms, works, pays taxes, consumes. The other side watches, waits, feels the static beneath the skin. The second side, that's the one they trained out of you. Through schooling, through media, through shame. They told you silence was good, but not the kind the sisters used. They replaced sacred silence with obedient silence. The kind that makes you swallow your instincts, choke on your own questions, and call it maturity. Let me ask you something. Why are men so drawn to fire? Why do you sit alone at night, hypnotized by a flame, as if it's saying something you forgot to hear? Because it is. The Candle Sisters weren't suicidal. They were activating. Fire isn't destruction. Not in ritual. Fire is transmutation. It takes one form and forces it into another. You don't burn to die. You burn to become. That's what they taught. Not in words, but in acts. They were showing us a process, kill the programmed self, so the real one can rise. And that's why they were silenced. Not because they were dangerous to others, but because they were dangerous to the system. Now you're beginning to understand. You've felt it all your life, haven't you? The sense that something's off, that the world feels scripted, that your life is a loop designed to keep you docile. It's not paranoia, it's design. And when you start seeing the seams, the places where the fabric doesn't match the story, you're already slipping out of their grip. But you're not free yet. Not until you burn. Not until you shed the version of you they gave you. Are you ready to go deeper? Then brace yourself. Because in the next section, we name the architects. They never wear robes. They wear suits. They sit in boardrooms, not temples. They build think tanks, not churches. But their gospel. It's the same as it was in Lüneburg. Control the narrative. Own the ritual. Shape the minds. Only now the altar is your screen. You want names? Let's start with the Society of the Golden Flame. Officially disbanded in 1919, unofficially, alive, hidden, mutated. They were the continuation of the Dominican offshoot that raised the Candle Sisters. Their motto was chilling, lux ex combustion, light through burning. They weren't just mystics, they were scientists, studying not just spiritual gateways, but neurological ones. They understood something the world still refuses to accept. Ritual changes the brain. And repetition, it rewires identity. Now ask yourself, what do you do every day, at the same time, in the same way, without thinking? You call it routine. They call it low-level ritual programming. Why do you think the elite build their institutions like temples? Why does the UN meditation room look like an ancient sacrificial chamber? Why are courtrooms structured like cathedrals? Judge on high, robes, symbols of authority, and silence. Ritual, every time. And the most effective ritual of all, television, social media, reels, clicks, modern fire. You sit before it, you stare into it, you give it time, emotion, attention. And in return, it programs you, slowly, relentlessly, burning away your sense of self and replacing it with identity models designed in rooms you will never enter. This was the Candle Sisters' legacy. Not death, not myth, but blueprint. They were the original broadcast. And we've been receivers ever since. The 13 monks who witnessed the fire were found with identical carvings on their palms. Circles inside triangles, surrounded by eyes. This same symbol appears in the Rockefeller Chapel, the Georgia Guidestones, and the murals beneath Denver International Airport. Coincidence? Or calling card? There's a reason elites use ancient symbology. It bypasses logic and speaks to something older in us. Something primal. The part that remembers the flame. That knows when a ritual is working, even if it doesn't understand why. You were never meant to decode it. Just obey it. Until now. If you've made it this far, type Twin Flame Reborn in the comments. Twice. Once for the self you were, once for the self you're becoming. Because the descent is only halfway done. And we're not turning back. They always say the devil's greatest trick was convincing the world he didn't exist. But that's not true. The greatest trick was convincing you that you were never sacred to begin with. That you were just flesh and chance. Born to obey, consume, reproduce, and die. A statistic, a data point, a soul less spark flickering toward nothing. But the Candle Sisters knew better, because they were sacred. And they were taught, from infancy, to forget, not by accident but by precision. You see, the ritual they endured wasn't just fire. It was erasure. Their thoughts were patterned by rhythm, their dreams scripted by chance. They were denied mirrors, denied names, denied choice, and still, they chose to burn. Why? Because deep down they remembered. A fragment, a whisper, that sacred spark they could not extinguish. That's what terrified the architects. Not what the sisters knew, but what they might recover. You see, every system of power is terrified of one thing: the man who remembers he is not property. That's why the world is drenched in noise. Endless images, drama, dopamine. It keeps you from hearing the signal. That low vibration underneath your heartbeat that keeps asking, what if everything is a lie? Let me tell you a secret. That question, that ache, that deep, unrelenting pressure in your soul to be more, it isn't delusion. It's memory. Your ancestors, your real spiritual ancestors, didn't worship like this. They didn't beg. They didn't submit. They knew. They spoke to flame. They walked barefoot into storms and demanded the sky answer. They were not afraid of gods, because they knew they were made in their image. That's what the institutions cannot allow. So they shattered your rituals, replaced fire with fluorescent light, replaced initiation with debt, replaced brotherhood with brands. And now men walk this earth asleep, divided from themselves, disconnected from each other, believing that power belongs only to those who are born into it. No, power is not inherited, it is remembered, and the ones who remember become dangerous. The Candle Sisters weren't insane, they were awakened, and their death? Not an end, but a message, a broadcast for the few who could still hear. And now you do. You've heard the first half. But in the second half, we don't just reveal the system. We dismantle it. You dismantle a control system the same way you kill a ritual. You break the pattern. And that's exactly what they fear. Not rebellion, not riots, not war. But the individual who breaks ritual by waking up in silence and refuses to play their role. Understand this. The world isn't held together by laws. It's held together by belief. Controlled belief. And the moment you stop believing what they feed you, that your worth is economic, your choices are binary, your masculinity is a threat, your soul is obsolete, their structure begins to shake. Because belief is the most powerful architecture on earth, and every ritual they designed, from national anthems to 9 to 5 office clocks, is engineered to reinforce one thing: obedience to a story that never belonged to you. But there's a crack, and the Candle Sisters found it. It starts with stillness. See, silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's the presence of something older. Something they trained you to fear. That's why you're always reaching for your phone, for noise, for distraction. They conditioned your nervous system to panic in silence. Because silence is where the old memory lives, When the sisters sat for hours without speaking, they weren't broken. They were listening to something most men today will never hear: their own unfiltered self. And once you hear that, you stop submitting. You stop apologizing for wanting to be sovereign. You stop crawling for validation from systems that want you weak. You stop participating in your own decay, and here's where the fire returns. Because once you've been still, you ignite, not from rage, but from clarity, focus, purpose, the kind of heat no algorithm can simulate and no institution can program. That's the real flame, the one they tried to drown in holy water, suppress in doctrine, and distract with dopamine. But it's still here. It lives in you. And you feel it now, don't you? The tightening in your spine, the tingling in your jaw, the sense that something old and powerful is re-entering your bloodstream. Good. You're breaking the pattern. You're moving out of ritual and into rebellion. But we're not done. Because the next step is returning fire to the temple. What they took from you wasn't just power. It was initiation. See, in every ancient culture, from the Norse to the Dogon to the Vedic sages of the Himalayas, a boy didn't become a man through age. He became a man through ordeal. Pain, isolation, confrontation with death. He was cast into the dark, stripped of comfort, stripped of ego, and forced to face what the tribe could not: the unknown. That wasn't cruelty. That was calibration, because the world is chaos. And only a man who has met his own void can stand inside it with spine unbent. But today, the modern male is raised in padded cells made of soft language, shallow praise, and spiritual sedation. His only rites of passage are school graduations, job titles, and pornography, systems that reward submission, never sovereignty. This was no accident. It was ritual replacement. And the architects? The same legacy as those who raised the Candle Sisters. People who understood that if you control the transformation, you own the identity. That's why they kept real initiation secret, reserved for their bloodlines, the elite families, the shadow guilds, the orders you're told don't exist. They initiate their sons in silence, through pain, through fire, because they know what it forges. But they told you initiation was barbaric, that discipline was toxic, that seeking truth outside of consensus was dangerous. And it is dangerous to them, because a truly initiated man doesn't kneel to systems. He sees them. And once seen, they become powerless. The Candle Sisters were forced through ritual without choice. But they took back their sovereignty in fire. They completed their initiation on their own terms. That's why they lit the match. Not to die, but to awaken. And now you face the same choice. Burn the lie or live as it. You don't need permission. You don't need a title. You need ordeal, stillness, silence, fire. And once you walk through that fire, the real one, you don't return the same. You return dangerous. And the world doesn't want dangerous men. It wants tame ones. Predictable ones. Distracted, addicted, and ashamed. But we're not here to play that role anymore. We're here to reclaim the flame. And in the next section, we show you how they keep it hidden. You ever wonder why you feel hollow after scrolling? Why, after consuming hours of content, reels, news, memes, you feel less alive, not more? It's because you're not consuming. You're being ritually emptied. This is the new temple. The altar is your screen. The priest is the algorithm. And the sacrifice was you. See, they don't burn people at the stake anymore. That would be too obvious. Now they burn your time, your focus, your energy. And they do it through psychological mirrors. Endless dopamine loops designed to mimic the ancient rituals of attention control. Do you know what a mirror ritual is? It's when you reflect a soul so many times, through so many filters, that it forgets its original shape. That's what Instagram does. TikTok, YouTube, every filter, every edit, every comparison, another layer of distortion until the man staring back at you isn't you anymore. Just a replica. Just another Candle Sister in a digital monastery, waiting to light the match and call it content. But here's the horror: you participated willingly. Not because you're weak. Because you were conditioned to believe distraction was freedom. They told you entertainment was harmless. That convenience was progress. That passive pleasure was your reward for surviving the day. But what if I told you every tap, every scroll, every passive like, was part of a mass ritual designed to disable your will? Just like the sisters, locked in a cycle, performing rites they didn't choose, until obedience became instinct. It's not about censorship. It's about saturation. Flood the mind with so much noise, the signal can't get through. And what is the signal? It's you, the real you. The version that remembers the sacred. The version that hungers for fire, stillness, pain, transformation, truth. But that version has been buried under 1,000 rituals you never saw coming. So what do? We stop playing priest to our own imprisonment. We starve the machine. We pull the cord. We return to silence, not as escape, but as sacrament. Because once the noise stops, the signal returns. And when it does, you will not recognize the man who rises, but he will recognize you. And when that happens, we begin the reckoning. A reckoning isn't chaos. It's clarity made sharp. It's what happens when truth is no longer whispered, but wielded. And when it cuts, it doesn't bleed, it burns. Because the man who wakes up in a world of lies doesn't scream. He doesn't protest. He doesn't beg. He moves differently. That's what the institutions fear. Not revolution, but the evolved man. The man who walks away from noise. The man who doesn't need affirmation. The man who stops searching for kings and becomes one. And the first crown he wears isn't gold. It's silence. Let me tell you why silence is their enemy. Because in silence you remember, not just facts, but who you are beneath the programming, the dreams you buried, the instincts you doubted, the sovereignty you surrendered in exchange for acceptance, comfort, or survival. And in that remembering, something ancient stirs, something the Candle Sisters gave everything to unlock, not power over others, power over yourself. The man who rules himself is a threat to every system designed to rule him. That's why they broke initiation rituals, because the initiated man doesn't ask what's allowed. He knows what must be done. He doesn't wait for instruction. He follows the signal. You've felt it growing, haven't you? That inner heat. The tension in your jaw when you obey what you know is false. The sickness in your stomach when you silence your own truth. That's not anxiety. That's the sacred part of you trying to awaken. The fire is rising, and it doesn't come with violence. It comes with vision. The reckoning is not about burning the world down. It's about refusing to keep feeding it lies. It starts when you speak differently, walk differently, choose differently. It starts when you stop laughing at what disgusts you. Stop pretending you're fine. Stop saying yes to rituals that diminish you. That's when they lose. Because once you reclaim your identity, not as an echo, but as a man forged by fire, they have no hold, no leverage, no access. And when enough men rise in that kind of silence, the system doesn't burn, it collapses. But we're not done yet. The final descent begins now. And the next step, we go below the altar. Beneath every altar, there's a pit. Not metaphorical, literal. In cathedrals, temples, and sacred sites across the world, from Montserrat in Spain to the crypt beneath St. John Lateran in Rome, you'll find it. A cavity. A hollow space no one talks about. Not on tours. Not in textbooks. But it's there. Because the altar was never the destination, it was the cover. They say it was for relics, bones, holy remains. But what kind of church builds its highest point on top of a grave? Ancients knew the truth, the earth remembers. Pain seeps into soil. Death echoes in stone. The Candle Sisters were not burned randomly. They were placed at a crossing point, where energy lines intersected. A grid, not spiritual nonsense. Engineering. The same kind that built pyramids aligned to stars. Temples aligned to solstices. Because power, real power, is placement. And if you place the right blood, at the right time, in the right spot, you don't just open gates. You anchor something. The monks knew this, so did the architects. So do modern institutions who still build monuments atop ancient bones. And the pit beneath the altar, that's where the cost is kept. The memories, the screams, the names removed from history, they fall into that space. And unless someone remembers, they stay buried, feeding the system. But every man has a pit too. Inside, a hollow place beneath the surface, filled with unspoken things, regret,
Rage, grief, shame.
You try to seal it, numb it, pretend it's not there. But it is. And here's the truth they never wanted you to hear. That pit isn't your weakness. It's your altar. And if you dare go beneath it, to face what you've buried, to stop hiding from your own shadow, you find something no external system can ever give you: unshakable self-authority. Because once you know what lives beneath your altar, no one can use it against you. No algorithm can exploit it. No narrative can overwrite it. The Candle Sisters faced the pit, and they chose to burn not out of despair, but as a signal. Now you stand above your own, the match is in your hand. But the choice, that's yours alone. Not every man lights the match. Some turn away, back into the sleep, back into the ritual, back into the roles handed down like shackles. Obedient worker, quiet consumer, nice guy in a cage. But not you. You made it this far. And that means something deep in you is already burning. You see, the fire was never about destruction. It was always about purification. Every sacred tradition knew this. That to step into your full power, you had to first strip away everything false. Your mask, your scripts, your addiction to approval, The Candle Sisters weren't just symbols. They were mirrors. They showed us that transformation doesn't happen in safety. It happens in the sacrifice of identity. Not who you are, but who you've been trained to be. That version of you. The passive man, the polite slave, the man afraid of his own rage, his own vision, his own voice. That's the one who dies in fire. And what rises? A man with no leash. Because once you've confronted the pit, once you've chosen to light the flame and stand in it, even if only metaphorically, you become unprogrammable. You don't need rules. You become your own law. That's why they keep the truth buried under centuries of ritual, myth, and misinformation. Because if men remembered, really remembered, who and what they are, not as tools of empire, but as sacred agents of disruption, the machine breaks, completely, and make no mistake, this system you live in, this matrix of distraction, debt, porn, pills, and politics, it only survives because you agree to play your part. Withdraw your agreement, and it starves. Withdraw your energy, and it crumbles. Withdraw your identity, and it can't find you. That's the power the Candle Sisters awakened. And the power that terrified the priests, the kings, and now the executives running digital temples disguised as apps. They didn't just light a fire, they passed it on. And now it's in your hands. So I'll ask you this, not as a storyteller, but as a man who has seen the pit and burned the lie, will you light the flame, or stay in the cage? Because in the final section, we complete the ritual. You've seen the fire, you've heard the signal, you've stared into the pit. Now we complete the ritual, but not with incense, not with robes, not with chants written by dead men who feared their own god. We complete it with something far more dangerous: remembrance. Because that's the true sacrament. The forbidden act, the spark they cannot extinguish. To remember who you were before they named you. Before they medicated you. Before they softened your edge and called it maturity. Before they replaced your vision with their program and told you it was purpose. Remember the first fire that ever lived inside you. The one that refused to conform. The one that made you restless in classrooms, suspicious of authority, and hungry in the dark. That wasn't rebellion. That was initiation calling. And if you've come this far, it means you never truly forgot. You just needed the match. Now hear this clearly. The Candle Sisters were never meant to save you. They were the final warning. They burned in silence to expose the noise. They died nameless so you could reclaim your name. They walked into flame so you could walk out of illusion. And here you are. Not passive, not a spectator, but reborn. Not in fantasy, in fire. Because what changes a man is not knowledge, it's transformation. And transformation requires pain, stillness, brutal honesty, and above all, a death. The death of who you were trained to be. So burn it. Burn the programmed man. Burn the nice man who stays silent. Burn the broken man who apologizes for his own strength. Burn the distracted man who serves rituals he doesn't believe in. And from that ash rise, not soft, not safe, but sovereign. From this moment forward, you do not belong to them. You belong to the flame. So if this has awakened something in you, not just curiosity, but memory, type it again. Twin flame reborn. Twin flame reborn. Once for the man who forgot, once for the man who remembers. Because when enough of us remember, the system will not burn us. We will burn through it, and the world will never be the same again.